Do you have it re-recording? Oh, yep. Okay, cool. Thank you, Tessa. I call this meeting to order. Today is Monday, July 24th, 2023. I call this meeting to order. We are here for an executive session with our Good afternoon. Hi, we are here. We're still working on some technical things for our presentation, but today is Monday, July 24th, 2023. We are here in the Commissioners' Conference Room for a work session with our Community Planning, Infrastructure, and Resources Department. And we have a full agenda. I am Larimer County Commissioner Jody Shag-McNally, Chair of the Board of County Commissioners. Today, Commissioner Stevens is excused. I'm also joined by my colleague, Commissioner John Kafalis. Also at our table is our County Manager, Lorenda Volker, and our Community Planning and Infrastructure Resources Director, Leslie Ellis, and also Community Development Director, Rebecca Everett. So with that, we have a full agenda today, and I will turn it over to Leslie to kind of get started as we're still trying to get our technical presentation up. But Leslie, I'll let you get rolling. Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, Commissioners. And I will just quickly hand it off to our guests from the City of Fort Collins. You've heard presentations before on the East Mulberry Plan, and we're lucky to have Sylvia back with us again to present, and I'll let her go ahead and introduce her item and her team here. Megan Keith and Sylvia Tapman-Burris are here to present the item on East Mulberry. And they also provided some answers to questions that you had in the last work session, and they can elaborate on those responses today as well. So Great. Thank you for being here.
Great. Thank you so much, Leslie. And again, I'm Sylvia Tapman-Burris with the City Manager's Office at City of Fort Collins. And I'm joined today by our Senior Planner, Megan Keith, who's been really leading this work. So we're excited to share it with you today. I think we're dealing still with some tech issues here, so excuse us. But we are here to share the East Mulberry Plan with you today. And we just thank you for having us back today. We were here last June, or this past June, and want to just be able to share with you that we've released the sections 1 and 2 of the East Mulberry Plan. Those talk about some of the existing conditions within the plan, as well as the some of the goals of that plan, including some of the big ideas and some of the things that we certainly heard through community engagement. We'll also give you a preview of Section 3, and that's more about the contemplation of annexation and that process, and that'll be released here this week and will be shared with Council basically at the same time with the public, and so we can send that over to you as well. We hope also that you've been receiving our newsletter that sort of allows community members to see that. So if not, we can make sure that you're on that list for sure. So let's see, I'll skip over that map, but
So you may need to, it looks like a cord problem.
cord problem, okay.
Sorry.
No problem. My computer seems to be struggling as well. There's that. Okay. Okay, there we go.
Yay.
Awesome. Okay, so just really quickly set the context for the area that we're talking about. The area in red is our plan area. And then you'll see that the yellow area is a little bit different. That's the current enclave, and that sort of gets smaller as redevelopment occurs, especially most recently with the Bloom development. And then I just want to mention the 2002 plan. That's still the existing plan that we're working off of today. And that's what we've worked here to update. So that was jointly adopted by City of Fort Collins and Larimer County, and it was really to implement the update to city plan at the time. It addressed some key and high-level policy things around maintenance of public facilities and services, certainly contemplated future annexation, the costs of some of the potential improvements in the area, some potential redevelopment for the future, and some streetscape designs of some of the key corridors there. I'll walk you through a bit too of where we've been. This is just again to set some of the context here. This has been a project that's been ongoing for several years now. The enclave itself that we're talking about today was formed in 2018, and the work continued through today with a lot of community engagement, including with residents within the area, business owners, and those who work and sort of commute in and out of that area. So the plan is being released in sections right now, and that's to make sure that we have enough time for public review prior to what we anticipate to be first reading in September of this year with our city council. And we hope that we can also have other conversations with you before that adoption date. So I'll just briefly touch on some high-level things within sections 1 and a little bit starting out in section 2, and then I'll turn it over to Megan here in just a minute. Sorry. All right, so just to go through a little bit of the table of contents, we have an introduction that really goes through some of the existing conditions and history of the area, then some of the big ideas, which we call sort of some of the policy direction and some of the thinking on bits of implementation, either with or without annexation. And so that looks at some of the demographics within the area and just sort of high level touching on what annexation is. And this plan is really also meant to be user friendly for folks within the area so that they can open it up and sort of understand what's going on. And so that's part of the public release, is to really understand what translates, what are we communicating, is it getting across to folks. Section 2, again, are those big ideas, the 7 plan goals and those strategies. And then section 3, which will be out this week, that Megan will talk to you a bit about here in a bit, is really the meat of implementation that contemplates some of the annexation policies as well. So I wanted to put in the existing and changed conditions here just to really illustrate how much coordination across different departments at the city this plan has taken. And so really it contemplates all city services within existing conditions. And I think those are all necessary within this area plan. That's not always the case with our area plans, but I think here understanding what would be taken on with annexation and what those services might mean within this area. And so that's everything from streets to multimodal transportation, fire safety, future parks and recreation opportunities, development, and certainly a lot of the employment industry that's really unique in that area. We heard a lot from the community. This is just a snapshot. We hope you received the engagement summary that was put together by our consultant at the Institute for the Built Environment. And that really looks at all that we heard within that area, and that helped us to create some of the policies that you'll hear about in a minute. But thinking through people having issues or concerns around infrastructure and future development, certainly around the aesthetics at the gateway, some of those character and uses, certainly around business preservation and potential gentrification and things like that. And then wondering what would the impact of annexation be on small businesses, especially in the near term, and then what are some of those policies that the city could take on upon annexation in that area. So there are some things that do change upon annexation as that occurs, and then there are some things that don't necessarily change upon annexation. So in terms of law enforcement is generally transferred to City of Fort Collins Police Services from the Sheriff's Department. And that usually happens at the same time that annexation occurs, but I think in this case it could depend a bit on the size and some of the that sort of partnership between the Sheriff's Department and City of Fort Collins. Electric service would generally be purchased by the utilities from City of Fort Collins, Storm drainage would be transferred to Fort Collins. Road maintenance, in some cases, the reason why that's there is really because the policy within the Larimer County Urban Area Street Standards, which are followed by City of Fort Collins and Larimer County, is that if there isn't maintenance currently done on roads by the county, that would be true with the city as well. So that's current policy. And so I'd say that that's why we have, in some cases, any maintenance that's that the county is doing would be transferred to the city as well. And that would be true of any of the public improvement districts as well, that those would be, the management of those would be transferred over to the city. And then water and wastewater would generally stay the same. Fire protection would still be PFA. Health and Human Services and animal control would stay the same. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Megan Keith, who's going to take you through some of the pieces and parts of Section 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. And thank you for having us here again today. I will go through these very briefly because hopefully you've received the draft of Section 1 that includes these goals, Section 1 and 2, but I will just touch on them quickly. They're subject of each goal. So Goal 1 of the plan focuses on preserving this area as a prosperous commercial and industrial hub for small businesses and industry. Goal 2 is about stormwater infrastructure and improving the stormwater infrastructure in this area. Goal 3 is about increasing the multimodal and mobility of this area, multimodal access, I should say. And then Goal 4 is about increasing access for residents and businesses to other amenities and services. And I should also note that these goals were formulated with substantial community and business input, and a lot of that is shared in the document that Sylvia mentioned that we had shared with you all. You can go to the next one. Goal 5 is about preserving this area for affordable, naturally occurring affordable housing. Goal 6 is about protecting and promoting the existing natural, historic, and cultural resources here. And then Goal 7 is about the gateway aesthetic and kind of entrance into Fort Collins. And another note is that the goals have numbers just for purposes of kind of tracking and listing out specifically listed implementation action item numbers, but the numeric system does not indicate a priority or order in that sense. Now, as Sylvia mentioned, I'd like to spend just a minute talking about Sections 3 and 4 of the plan. And I know Sylvia just mentioned Section 3, but it's likely that we will be splitting this into 2 sections, so that's why I'm referring to it as 3 and 4. And these will be released this week. Last time we were here, we shared this information regarding the types of things that may amount to annexation thresholds in the East Mulberry enclave. And again, these primarily consist of things like maintaining logical boundaries as natural annexations continue and development continues in the corridor, ability to achieve policy priorities by preserving natural resources and their associated buffers, or preserving mobile home parks. And then the last one is about external funding and capital project alignment. So the ability to offset some of the costs of annexation through grant or other funding opportunities, along with efficiencies of completing multiple priority projects at the same time. And so now I would like to spend a moment talking to you about what some of the proposed process that's included in Section 4 would be after a threshold is identified. So this first step here would be that city staff would identify the potential annexation boundaries of the area where a threshold may have occurred. And these boundaries in some cases could be not just that area that initiates the threshold, but also kind of surrounding areas if multiple thresholds can be logically combined. You may recall last time we were here last month, we had those diagrams showing sort of a threshold initiated by development, but the ultimate boundary of the threshold annexation area eventually included sort of combining with natural resource protection. By the time that this first step is reached, staff will have already completed sort of initial review and deemed that the threshold is viable to pursue analysis of. The next step would be proposed to have a neighborhood meeting with residents and businesses within the potential annexation area. And then going from there, after the neighborhood meeting, there would be kind of an analysis period where staff would conduct additional analysis on this existing infrastructure, continuing to inform the community that would be affected by this potential annexation, informing them of some of what to expect. And also during this stage, we would recommend forming an annexation transition committee as applicable, and I'll speak to that on the next slide. And those boundaries of the potential threshold area could be adjusted based on this analysis time. Hit the next one. So the fourth step here would be that then analysis would be shared with decision makers to identify timing and other logistics around whether to pursue annexation at this time. And by decision makers, I mean primarily Planning and Zoning Commission and also City Council members. And then sort of at the last stage, the final kind of decision point here would be whether to initiate annexation proceedings immediately or if there might need to be some delay to, for example, ensure that we can begin policing and serving the area in some of those capacities. And so we would anticipate close collaboration with Larimer County throughout this process, but particularly at this last stage to coordinate timing and transition elements. So now speaking about the Annexation Transition Committee that I mentioned. So if you're not familiar, in the Colorado Revised Statutes, there is a section that speaks to cases in which enclave annexations may require the formation of this Annexation Transition Committee. And on this slide, you'll see sort of the requirements resulting in needing that committee would be the population exceeding 100 persons or the area containing more than 50 acres. And that committee shall be composed of 9 members, 5 of whom shall reside, operate a business or own property in the enclave, and then 2 of whom shall represent the annexing municipality, so Fort Collins, and 2 of whom shall represent the county in which the enclave is situated, so 2 from Larimer County. So Plan Section 4, which we'll be releasing this week, provides the city's recommendation of how to incorporate formation of this committee in the process, but we'd be very interested to hear feedback related to this, as well as how committee representatives from the county shall be selected. We're working through this on our side now and working out some details, but would appreciate feedback on that. Another element that's covered under this Plan Section 4 is the Land Use Framework Plan. We are using place types from our city plan, structure plan map, rather than assigning zoning designations at this stage. So when areas do annex into city limits, they would receive a zoning designation. But for purposes of this plan, we've found that place types can more flexibly accommodate all the diverse uses of this area and help continue to preserve the commercial, industrial, and employment districts within the enclave. And so this map has largely not changed from the 2019 structure plan map that appears in city plan, aside from a few adjustments to represent more recent annexations or other development-related changes. So most changes are minor, but one larger change that I do want to draw attention to is the area outlined in blue, both on this one and I think the previous slide may have had a shape. Yeah, that shape kind of to the northeast of the air park. This area includes sort of the former airstrip and runways, and we've designated this from previously an industrial district to a district that we call Research and Development Flex. And so R&D Flex is one of our most flexible place types that supports a wide variety of light industrial employment and commercial uses. And we think that use of this place type can accommodate a variety of future uses, functions and land uses, and continue to serve this area as industrial, but as this area evolves and changes, to be able to kind of accommodate those changes over time. And then one more slide with this framework plan map on it. I know commissioners have asked us about kind of preservation of the existing agricultural service uses around the interchange. And so another change that I wanted to call out was that this area in this blue circle is also designated as an industrial district. And upon coming into the city, we would likely apply an industrial zone district. But something that we outline in section 4 of the plan is that upon this area coming in, that we would look at our industrial zone district and add appropriate uses to it based on what's located here. And then also apply a proximity-based standards, so saying that these uses can exist within a certain distance of the interchange in that area. So that's how we propose to accommodate those existing uses.
May I pause you just a moment there? And thank you for considering that. I know we've been bringing that up a lot, but I see Commissioner Cafals might have a question. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Megan. I'm curious that you're still referring to this area as commercial industrial zone district, and I'm wondering, since it's so ag specific, and we have I don't know what we would call we are identified as an ag enterprise area. Why wouldn't we want to make it more specific to ag? Is it possible that would limit the uses? I'm just trying to understand why we can't call it what it is. And I'm sure there's some planning logic that is beyond my pay scale.
Yeah, I mean, these place types that come from our city plan designation, we, don't have a place type that, speaks specifically to. We have sort of parks and natural protected lands and community separator as some of our place type designations, but we feel that these sort of adjustments that we've proposed through this section to add these uses specifically around the interchange and very much customize sort of what would be added to that industrial zone district designation there with these proximity standards could really serve in preserving those existing kind of agricultural service business uses there. So that's how we would propose to approach that. I don't know if you want to add or...
Yeah, thank you, Megan. I think Megan really summed it up, but I think it's also, it is that those businesses really fit more within industrial uses rather than our agricultural uses in those areas. So we're thinking of like the meat processing plant, the livestock auction, and the co-op, that those actually end up being more in the industrial service area for our zone district rather than more of our agricultural uses. So that's sort of where we've been leaning around protection and preservation of those.
May I do a quick follow-up? No, thank you both. That's helpful, and I'm looking over at our long-range planner. He kind of helps me, gives me a couple of nods. That seems to make sense, so thank you for explaining that. I guess one of the questions that I think I posed, and I'm sure we'll get to the questions, is it inevitable that this area will be annexed into the city, or is it based on one of those thresholds? And if so, is that the best way, is that the best option to preserve the ag industrial activities that are occurring there? Does that make sense, colleagues?
It does.
Thank you, Megan.
I would say that if this area were to experience the types of things that we've identified as a threshold, and then it was city council determined that they wanted to pursue annexation through that activity, then it would be annexed. But it could take, a number of years under this approach as well. I don't know if you would want to supplement, but
If I could weigh in, I think from the county perspective, this area is now fully surrounded by city limits. It's an urban level of development in terms of the infrastructure that's out there and the type of traffic, the amount of traffic generated and all of that. It really is, the whole Mulberry enclave really is full of uses that are urban in scale. So from a urban versus rural perspective, those land uses are probably more appropriate within city limits at some point. And that was, I believe, City of Fort Collins' intent in creating the enclave was that they would eventually go into the city, but on what timeline would be in question. So but I think the matter of preservation and how to preserve those existing businesses is a really important question.
So, and before you get started, that's kind of where I was going to lean with my question. It sounds like you've been hearing us kind of, I think of the whole board has been kind of repetitive about preserving those businesses, because I hear that's kind of some of the main and only areas that some folks can get some of those services or buy equipment. It sounds like the large equipment that's really an important center. So what I'm hearing is, it sounds like you also see that and value that. You're trying to preserve that in the long run. So when you talked about adding definitions or changes to your industrial zoning to kind of help facilitate supporting that area, what kind of things are you thinking of? I know that's like down the road, but just kind of high level, just one of those things that you're thinking of. Because I know one concern is, some of these farmers on a $500,000 piece of farm equipment, they were paying only county taxes. And then if we're going to add fees and stuff, this could put an extra amount of money. And I know it's kind of, we're paying for services, but I'm just trying to helping, kind of making that runway or that soft landing kind of so it's not immediate, but kind of something they can slowly start to plan for. Am I making sense? I don't know if I'm making sense, because I just got back from a national conference late last night, and so I'm looking at you kind of like, oh yeah, it's Monday, I'm back, so.
No, appreciate that question. And I think, and I'll just answer in terms of the taxation specifically for anything that is farm equipment or is going to be used agriculturally, those are sales tax exempt.
Okay.
And so they still would, whatever county tax may apply, I'm not sure of the county's tax standards, but sales tax from the city of Fort Collins would not apply if it's an agricultural use specifically.
Excellent.
And then to the land use update, I'll of course let Megan speak to this too as well, but we are in the process of updating the land use code in phase 1 right now, and phase 2 could contemplate some of those industrial zone districts ahead of annexation as well of East Mulberry. And I think that industrial zone district, because we don't have a lot of industrial land within Fort Collins, could use an update anyway. And so I think there are some uses we would want to take a look at citywide as well. And then I'll certainly let Megan speak to the specifics of East Mulberry.
yeah, just to add to that. So I think at the time that this area would be coming through for annexation, we would study what those uses that have a mismatch between whatever our industrial zone district allows and what exists now in this area. And as Sylvia mentioned earlier, that could be things like the kind of livestock processing type of uses that are not allowed in our industrial zone district, and then add those to the allowed uses there with that proximity standard to kind of capture an appropriate area around the interchange area so that those uses, and those would be evaluated sort of at the time it comes through for annexation.
I appreciate that thoughtful approach. So would this be fair? Maybe and again, I apologize if I'm not making sense, but my heart and my head are saying it sounds to me, if I back out about a 50,000 foot level at this, it sounds like we share kind of the same common ground or values for that area. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for giving the opportunity to respond to that, because I forgot to say that, yes, that is our intent. And generally, the philosophy here is to preserve the existing character of these areas and the businesses that have existed here for a long time. So that's true of both the air park, where there's a significant concentration of small businesses, as well as over here by the interchange that really has that kind of agricultural service history.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I kind of feel like we're on the same page. I just needed to state that. So for lack of a better term, it's, like I said, it's Monday. So Commissioner, do you have any other comments or questions?
It's good to be on the same page, or so it seems.
Okay, I appreciate you pausing for our questions. I'll let you proceed. Thank you.
That's great.
And just do a time check, are we?
I think we only have just our next steps slide, really,
Okay.
and then if there are other questions as well.
Yeah, so we were nearly through. So we just wanted to mention that sections 3 and 4 we anticipate releasing those this week, and we will distribute a link to that and would love feedback. And then each section of the plan is going to receive at least 1 month of public review period. And so we're already in that review period for sections 1 and 2. And then, as Sylvia mentioned, we're still on schedule at the moment to go to first reading of the plan in September. So those are our next steps there. Happy to take any other questions if we have time.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And obviously, you both and your team have been very diligently kind of working along this for a long time. I can see that. I really appreciate you kind of bringing this back and letting us have our input. And obviously, I feel like we've been heard. And so that's really important, I think. I'm sure staff are going to be reviewing this as well and providing maybe some feedback. So that's good, I hope, because you guys are the experts. I can read it, but I may not see things that you see. So I'm just curious about that.
Yes, our planning staff within community development is reviewing the draft plan, and I also participate on the core team for the project, and so I'm in the meetings every other week with the city to represent the county's kind of needs and perspectives.
Thank you, Rebecca. Commissioner, do you have any comments or questions?
Yes, I do. Overall comment is that I appreciate the level of communication that we've had. You folks have been very good about providing us, providing these updates, and I think that's really helpful, and working closely with our community development folks. So that's a real positive, and I thank you for that. We thank you for that. Wondering the questions that we posed. I'm not sure if we'll be discussing those today, or there'll be a written response to some of the questions that were raised. But then also regarding, you were asking Megan for input or something, and maybe it's premature on that. What do you call it? Annexation, something or other? Transition team?
Yeah, Annexation Transition Committee.
The state must have come up with that title. It's in state statute. The 4 people that are not, who don't live there or have a business there, 2 city folks and 2 county folks, are those meant to be staff and or elected officials? Can you speak to that?
It actually does not specify in the Colorado Revised Statutes. So we had, in our core team that Rebecca mentioned, we had sort of began discussing this, and we're still working through on the city side who the best representatives would be on that committee, and are interested to hear feedback from the county as well, who may best serve on that committee.
Thank you. I'd welcome any type of suggestion or recommendation, whether or not there's any added value for having an elected person as part of that process, or persons perhaps.
Yeah, I think the most important consideration is probably that the participants on both the city and county side are at a similar level in their organizations. So whether it's a decision to include elected officials on both sides, or planning staff on both sides or somewhere in between. I think it's probably most important that those levels are matching up.
And I just want to mention, I'm so sorry, that we do have a couple other questions that we weren't able to get answers from staff, including when a stoplight will be installed at Timberline and Vine. And so I can follow up in writing with a better answer on timing there.
If I may,
Commissioner.
I'll be brief, but I thank you for bringing that up, Sylvia. And actually, in my mind, that brings up a larger question about transportation infrastructure. I know that's one of the goals, but in light of all of the development, residential development that's occurring along East Vine Drive, that potentially will, I presume it's going to phase one of Motava, and the impacts on Country Club Road. And I've heard from constituents that the city is suggesting it's up to the county to solve that problem. But of course, I don't put a whole lot of stock until we can talk to people directly. But the takeaway, what I'm trying to say is that this is not just about the stoplight at Timberline. This is, I think it's a regional transportation thing that we have to get right, multimodal, because there's a lot of development that's occurring in that northeast quadrant. I mean, would you care to comment on that, Sylvia or Megan?
I'll say certainly there's a lot of new development that's happening there and regionally that connects within this area. And I think that's sort of what annexation can be about, is about sort of those urban level services and standards within that area, and sort of we're trying to think through that at the pace that council has directed us. And so I think thinking through what might those needs be into the future, and how can we solve sort of that resource problem is
I certainly appreciate that and respect that. I would say if we were to prioritize things, that stoplight might be a good one, because there's an awful lot of building and houses going up on both sides of Timberline on East Vine Drive, and it's already creating an impact on that two-lane road.
great. Thank you.
And that stoplight during rush hour is tricky. My wife always has to remind me the car on the right, if you stop at the same time, has the right of way, I think. Is that right?
Thanks, John.
So I think any of those questions, any of those, the whole board would be interested in. And I do want to echo my colleagues' comments I had said before. I just appreciate, the updates, and I feel like, you've been listening and kind of input. And I think, Rebecca, you made a great point about what's the best for filling that statutory role, and because these are some really important decisions. And I think it's thoughtful to kind of be thoughtful about this. So I appreciate the updates, and appreciate us all being kind of shared values here. That's pretty important. So appreciate that. So what's next? So would you need anything from us, or did you get everything you needed from us today?
I think if we can coordinate with Rebecca as well, I think probably finishing when we review sections 3 and 4, kind of if you have thoughts on that transition committee and the roles, we'll include that in that section of the plan. And then, we welcome feedback on any parts of the draft, and we'll distribute those when they're ready. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, staff. Appreciate you all being here today. So just curious on chime check, because I have a hard stop, and I know Commissioner Kowalski may run the meeting, but you'll just have one commissioner, but I have to meet with the senator's staff here, so I have to be on time, so.
I think we'll be okay with time. Our next
Okay.
item is the Heaven's Door discussion update, and I think we just need about 10 minutes for that, and then
Okay.
just some very brief updates to you from Rebecca and myself after that.
Thank you, City of Fort Collins.
I got this back from the national conference for our shout out, so. Okay. Welcome. So let you get started.
Okay, thank you. Megan Flanagan with Natural Resources. And
Alex Swartz with Land Agent.
All right. Yeah, thank you for having us. We wanted to just give a quick update and check in with you on a couple things with the recent acquisition of the Heaven's Door parcel down off of Highway 34 south of the Big Thompson Canyon. And as a reminder, we purchased this property late November of last year. And one of the pieces of the acquisition we sought and received your direction on was the option to continue to decide whether to keep the 435s in that southeast corner of the property or as part of the open space, or to look at divesting of them if we needed to recoup some of the funds from that acquisition. So that acquisition was $9 million. And at the time, we just didn't know what our cash flow would be with other priorities. And we also wanted to have a little time to just look, since these were already broken into 4 35-acre subdivided parcels, at what the options might be. But as we've had the last 9 or more so months to get to know the property a little bit, look into some of the limitations and trade-offs of doing this, we're proposing that we continue to keep the 4 35s within county ownership. I should say roughly 35s. I think one of them is 40 acres. And to keep them as part of the open space and not divest of them. And part of our thinking came from if we had divested of them, these are the 4 parcels that have the preponderance of the structures on them. So there's the house and then that separate studio building. And if we had sold them, the access to the 2 easternmost 35s is off Mule Deer Drive from the southeast. The 2 western 35s would have to be through the property off of Highway 34. And so as we looked at the trade-offs of doing that and what that would mean for the open space and the preponderance of our use and access, the conservation values of the valley, that was concerning to us. Also, when we really looked at the possibility of keeping the 4 of those as one parcel and selling them with those amenities on them, with a conservation easement in place, so there couldn't be additional development, the return on what we thought we could recoup was only about $1.1 million was our best estimate there. So it really did not seem like a great amount of money to recoup at the loss of some of the conservation values and this portion of the property. So we wanted to share that with you and get any feedback. And at the same time, wanted to share with you, we'd like to move ahead with removal of the buildings that are on site. And that would be all of the structures except one maintenance shed. And the reason for that is, as part of that evaluation we did of the value of the divestment of those parcels, all of the buildings on the property, following an inspection that we did with a third party, were either did not have a building permit pulled for them. In many cases, did not meet building code, so would have had to be brought up to code. Or they had, I think, over 250 serious deficiencies, primarily with the house. So even though the house looked fantastic in photos, I think we all probably went and looked at, it really had some significant problems, just being built over time piecemeal, not getting those building permits and not being done to code. So some of those were pretty extreme as far as electrical, gas leaks, and so forth. We can elaborate if you're interested, but so we don't see the value in retaining those buildings given the cost. We don't have a defined need for them. So wanted to circle back with you all, see if you had any questions or concerns with any of that as we would move forward. And then I can share a little bit about our approach that we're looking at.
I know we've discussed this, so I have no further questions. I know we're going to try to upcycle or recycle lots of that. So I think that's a great approach. Commissioner, you have any comments or questions?
I believe my question was answered, although I was curious about our policies for when we do deconstruction. Do we try to use those materials rather than putting them in the landfill?
Yeah, this is the part we're pretty excited about is Delahoy, the county's on-call contractor for constructing facilities, also does work with several groups to deconstruct facilities as well. And one is the National Center for Craftsmanship, which is a nonprofit. Okay, yeah, I think they're doing some work here in town, if you've seen their signs around. And what they will do is come out with a group of 10 to 15 students who are learning trades around construction. They'll be able to deconstruct pretty much down to the foundation of all the structures. And we anticipate that will divert about 30 to 50 tons of waste from the landfill. That material will either be sold or repurposed in some way. You know, maybe Habitat for Humanity will be donated, some or groups like that. Some of it can be sold. That can be sold. The dollars will come back to us to help offset our costs for that work. And then once it's down to the foundation, Delahoy will come in with a second contractor and recycle all that concrete that they'll be able to pull out of there.
Thank you. I know, like I said, we have kind of discussed that, so I appreciate all the work to do that, and it's just kind of great to hear. So proceed. Do you have anything else to share about this? Or cool.
That's all. Yeah,
Great.
thank you.
All right. Awesome. Well, great work, and I don't know if you need direction, but I think this is a great direction, and I'm really appreciate the thoughtful approach to this. So,
Okay, yeah, that's great. We just want to make sure you don't have any significant concerns as we move forward. So
I don't seem to hear any, so
thank you.
thank you.
Have a nice day. Stay cool.
Okay, Rebecca, I guess you're up.
Yes, I just have a couple brief updates for you all that are kind of heads up and logistical items. So first, as you remember, when we adopted new short-term rental regulations, we also adopted an ordinance that allows for stronger enforcement of short-term rentals. And in the meantime, after we adopted that ordinance, as the legislative session was wrapping up, there is new state legislation that allows for the county to directly regulate vacation rental services like Airbnb, VRBO. In some conversations directly with Airbnb in particular, we've identified some language that should be added to our ordinance to ensure that we have all of the right mechanisms in place to regulate in the way that we now have the ability to, or we are allowed to by the state. So we are planning to bring forward an amendment to that ordinance that you will see soon. And I just wanted to communicate that the intent of that is to align to the new state legislation that allows us to regulate those providers directly.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Rebecca. I presume that the conversations that you had were with the person from Denver who represents Airbnb, who had contacted me about some issues related to language. And I believe I referred them to I was following protocols. I think I referred them to you.
I believe that's correct, but Amy White is who our code compliance supervisor spoke with them directly, so she can speak more accurately to that.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Amy White, Code Compliance Supervisor. Airbnb reached out to us a couple months ago, which was kind of surprising because we'd been trying to get a live person there to ask some of these questions. And so they do have a Rocky Mountain team. The gal that we're specifically talking with is down in Castle Rock. So Frank and I had a phone conversation with them a week ago, maybe. And they had one of their attorneys there as well. And basically, our ordinance puts the onus, the responsibility on the owner to put that advertising number in the ad. But this will allow us to have the platform itself actually do that. And so we had put in our ordinance that the number needed to be in the banner headline. They are going to create a new separate space. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but they were having trouble with their software to get that lined up in there. And then I asked them, I said, well, what about if VRBO comes? Because we're dealing with Airbnb. And they said that they had been in contact, that a lot of the platforms, the larger platforms, had agreed to this language. And so once we put it in, it should cover all of the bigger platforms. And then I asked about the ones that are renting 30 days or longer, and they're actually going to separate those out. So there'll be short-term rental and long-term rental. So it looks like they're starting to maybe pay attention. So it was a good conversation. Frank, do you have anything to add?
So my question is, this change, I'm always hesitant or careful, cautious about when they want to make some changes. So this will not be, this will be enhancing our things and not eroding. And I just got back from the National Conference of National Association of Counties, and they were also trying to present a toolbox that they thought all counties should be following. So certainly hoping counties will look at how works best for them, but I'm just curious, I want to make sure this is only enhancing or expanding upon our thing and not a retraction at all.
Yeah, this would be expanding our authority to be able to regulate both the short-term rental license holder or the property owner and the vacation rental service. Right now, our ordinance is written a little more narrowly, and this would expand our ability to regulate.
And they even mentioned that right now, if the county was to say, hey, can you remove this ad for us, we might even be able to do that ourselves rather than having to contact them if we use this language that they've suggested. So we'll be working on that and bringing that to you at a future date.
Thank you.
All right, my final update, I just wanted to give you a heads up. A couple hearings from now. You've got a hearing scheduled for August 14th. We are planning that day to have both a 3 o'clock and a 6:30 p.m. hearing, and just wanted to give you the heads up now. The 3 o'clock hearing has only one discussion item currently scheduled. It's possible we'll have others added, but we don't anticipate that 3 o'clock hearing will be totally full. But we do have a couple items that we expect a fair amount of public interest in at the 6:30 hearing. So we moved a couple items straight to that 6:30 as well.
Thank you. Commissioner Kafalis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rebecca, thank you for the heads up. Related to the upcoming land use hearing schedule, we have one July 31st, and maybe you were going to get into that. I presume I think that's when we continued the one short-term rental application, and I presume that's on the agenda for next Monday, or when is it July 31st?
That's correct, yes. So you also have a hearing coming up next Monday, July 31st, and it does include the item that was tabled from the last hearing, the McGarvey, Cress, and Whitna short-term rental, and that will be heard at the 3 p.m. hearing, along with, there's one other discussion item scheduled for that afternoon.
And are you able to say, have we received additional information to help inform our decision-making?
Yes, we have received additional information, and you will be receiving a memo that explains kind of that provides some of that additional information and some extra explanation from both the county staff side and the applicant's side of things.
Thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other updates? Great, because I am about ready to have my heart stop.
And I'll just do two quick ones. One is next week we have a guest from DU coming to speak with you about the Mountain Campus. So if you have any questions or particular information that you'd like out of that session, please let me know and I can forward that along to them to be sure to be prepared. Otherwise, they'll just plan to share a general overview with you and be here to answer questions. But if there are things that you're hearing in the community, let me know, probably in an email or offline, given the time today. We can follow up on that, Commissioner, if you have.
Just a quick question. Thank you for that reminder. You're aware that we had a fairly comprehensive update from the DU Mountain Campus folks a couple of community conversations ago.
Yes.
Okay, that's all.
Yes, and we thought there could be benefit to just making sure that the full
Entire
board was
full board
aware, and
knows.
then this information would be televised in case there are others in the community that are curious about what's happening. They've informed me that their plans have not changed since those updates that they've done previously, so it's more of just a chance for broader community to hear from them and for you to be able to ask questions of them as well.
Thank you. I look forward for the full board to get that update, so thank you. So any other conversations?
And then one other final quick update, a good news item. We heard that the Estes plan will be receiving an award for innovative partnerships and collaboration from the Colorado Planning Association, and that award will be given at the end of September as part of their conference. This is the Estes Forward Plan, and if you recall, there was a lot of engagement that happened that included Jose and the Spanish-speaking community in Estes, and also the collaboration between the county and the town, I think, was part of that recognition. So that's just an exciting thing we'll keep our eye on it, and there'll be some information further released around that too to celebrate that accomplishment. So
And
those were just the quick
congratulations
things.
for that. And I did share that on the national stage when I spoke on the panel, because they were talking about building resiliency, and I talked about involving everyone in these plans and building relationships as part of that. And so, and that's why I handed you that form, that thing, is because the county is highlighted for our comprehensive plan on the building resiliency and wildfire thing from the National Association of Counties. We're shouted out there, so share that with your staff. So I finally got a hard copy, so I grabbed a few. So anyway, any other questions or concerns? Otherwise, I'm racing out the doors to meet with the center staff. So thank you all. Appreciate the updates. I look forward to all these meetings. And at, is it 2:30, we are adjourned. Thank you.